Welcome to this week's campaign catch-up. I'm joined by CBN's David Brody and John Stolnis. Gentlemen, a lot to get to. As always, you get a whole mountain of news in 1 week's time. 1 week is like probably too long between segments to cover all the stuff that's going on, but we'll get to as much of it as we can. So let's start with the protests. John, I know you were kind of keeping tabs on that a little bit. There are some protests. We see the clips going around, but I think the numbers weren't quite as big as what they were expecting.
Yeah, I mean, so they were expecting, I think, in the neighborhood of 30 to 40,000 pro-Palestinian protesters at the Democratic convention in Chicago this week, and at least some of the early reporting is that they're maybe only getting 10% of what it is that they were hoping to get. So 3 to 4,000 people so far. There was a tweet with a picture that all the other, like it's caught on now. Every news organization has shared it, essentially just showing like all of these pre-made signs for protesting littered on the ground of this area where they have 3 or 4 softball fields, and they were expecting this whole field to be filled and everybody to be carrying signs, and there's hundreds of signs just laying around, maybe even more than that. That are being unused at the moment. So I don't know. I mean, maybe some of it appears as though, at least early in the week, as the convention is getting underway, there doesn't seem to be the level of protest, at least in terms of the Israel's war in Gaza against Hamas, that we were expecting to start off. There had been all this talk about a 1968 feel to this Democratic National Convention, like the one that was in Chicago in that year. And at least here in the early going, and it is still very early in the week, we haven't seen that, and it looks like it may not come to pass. But we'll obviously have to wait and see how the week plays out.
Yeah, and even if there's a few less there, I mean, the ones that are there, who knows what they're going to do, right? I mean, right. I have seen some pretty intense clips, yelling at cops and those sorts of things, but we'll see how that progresses. Like you said, super early in the game. Now, David, you've been this is obviously the Democrats' big week here, and you've kind of been ahead on a story here that the Harris campaign is interestingly trying to get. I mean, I think there's no delusions here. I don't think they're going to be getting the majority of the evangelical vote anytime soon, but they do think they can get a slice of them. What are the details here, David, on like the numbers game? Like, how are they going to win this? What do they see as something that would be a success for them?
Sure. Well, let's start out by saying that this is a group that is not technically affiliated with the campaign. They are called Evangelicals for Harris. There's other groups out there. Christians for Kamala, and but the point is that what I reported on is that this Evangelicals for Harris group has now released their second ad in as many as 2 weeks. So 2 ads, 2 weeks, and they've been pretty provocative. This one, in essence, questions whether or not Trump is a false prophet and whether Christians are buying into that. Now, that's going to tick off and ruffle quite a few conservative evangelical feathers. But to your point, Dan, that's not the point. They're not trying to go for the hardcore conservative evangelical voters that are all in for Trump. That's not the play here. So let me just, once again, without kind of getting out the Excel spreadsheet and the PDF document, let me try to make this as kind of bottom line for everybody as possible. Look, if you look at the Pew Research, 37%. Let's start with this. White evangelical Protestants, that's who we're talking about. That is considered kind of the conservative evangelical base for Trump. White evangelical Protestants. If you look at that number, 37% of them consider Trump to be a great president. 37% think he was a good president. But then you get into some interesting numbers. 9% think he was average. 6% think he was poor. And 10% think he was terrible. That's among conservative evangelicals, white evangelical Protestants. And I understand there's different subsets and different groups and all that, but that's kind of your basic outline. So if you add up 9, 6, and 10, those average poor and terrible numbers, that's 25%. That's the number that's the group, at least, that Evangelicals for Harris are targeting. They understand they're not going to probably get all of those 25%, but if they get over 20%, they're going to be in business. As a matter of fact, I see 20% after talking to people like Ralph Reed and many others that have done this for decades and decades. 20% seems to be the magic number. So just to dial back, Barack Obama, among white evangelical Protestants, won 26% of them in 2008. He won the White House. Joe Biden won 24% of white evangelical Protestants. He won the White House. Hillary Clinton, 16%, much lower, did not win the White House. 20% seems to be kind of like the minimum that Kamala has to get to be in the ball game. If she's at 20, she has a good shot at winning. If she's at 22, 23%, she's probably, as a matter of fact, most likely going to win the White House. That's the play. Those are the evangelicals that the Kamala Harris team is going after. And look, there's been a lot of talk on social media and other places about, are you kidding me? Evangelicals for Harris, that's the oxymoron of oxymorons. You've got to be kidding me. But the truth is this. They're playing for a different type, like I said, of conservative evangelical. They're hoping to appear to the better angels aspect of all of this. The social justice gospel that invokes the love thy neighbor, a biblical commandment. That's what they're hoping for. They're hoping that there are evangelicals out there that are just tired, that are exhausted from Trump, from 8 years of Trump. And enough is enough with the insults and the this and the that. And I can't, I was with you in 16, 20, I was ready to check out. 24, I'm done. And so that's kind of the play for them. Whereas, of course, with the Trump campaign, they're saying, are you kidding me? This is a no-brainer. How in the world, as Trump said himself, how in the world could you be a Christian and vote for Kamala Harris? It makes absolutely no sense based on the life issue, based on marriage. I mean, just go down the line from a biblical, fundamental, traditionalist, inerrant word of God view of the Bible. So this is the parameters on both sides playing out, guys.
All right, yeah, you know, and it's interesting because I thought Trump had, at least what I thought was an effective response to essentially that group and those types and that sort of group appealing to the better angels. He said, saying he's mean, essentially, right? Like he doesn't have the care, but he's like, well, look at them. They've been trying to put me in prison and they are calling me a threat to democracy all day long. I thought that was an interesting retort there. All right, John, let's move to tonight because obviously this is the big, it's Democrats' big week kicking off here. So what can we expect to see as far as messaging goes? What are they going to be looking to appeal to here on stage tonight and the rest of the week?
Well, tonight you've got the guy that everybody thought a month and a half ago was going to be the guy who speaks on day 4, officially accepting the nomination. President Biden, the sitting president of the United States, is going to be delivering the keynote speech on the first night of the convention. And it's definitely, I think it's going to be very interesting to see how he's greeted in the room. I've seen that it seems as though he's going to receive a hero's welcome from those in the convention who are happy that he has stepped aside and that more energy has been thrust into this convention than was going to be there if he was the nominee. And I think that it's going to be a very weird speech for him. I don't know exactly how it's going to sound because he's certainly going to tout his 4 years and the things that he will point to as his accomplishments and the things that they are proud of and the things that they have done. And he's going to obviously paint the contrast between his vice president and Donald Trump. And my guess is also he's going to make a full-throated endorsement of Kamala Harris. He's obviously already done that numerous times, but really lay it all out there for the American people, maybe in a way that they haven't heard before, certainly all at one time, exactly why she is the messenger of hope for the Democratic Party and for the American people, and all the reasons why Donald Trump is not. I think it will be interesting to see if he echoes her message of a positive vision moving forward. That's what they're aiming for. The Harris campaign is a more positive, forward-looking message. We're lifting people up. We've heard her say that over the weekend in Pennsylvania a couple of different times, as opposed to the message that President Biden had, which was that more along the lines of, you can't vote for Trump. Trump's a threat to democracy. And whether or not he kind of transitions from that and moves into more of a yes, we can, hope and change type message that the Harris campaign is trying to have. So it'll be a very interesting speech. It's not very often that the sitting president, who a month and a half ago was the nominee. He was already the presumptive nominee. He had all the delegates locked up. Now is going to be the opening act for this Democratic National Convention this week.
I think you're right. I mean, it is going to be awkward. I mean, awkward, I forget what words you just used, but whatever you said, it kind of resonated with me. Awkward, odd, strange, because it's a tough spot because he's not happy about this. I mean, by all reports, he's not thrilled that he had to step aside. Obviously, he didn't want to do that, but kind of saw, was essentially shown, hey, the writing's on the wall here. And then they're throwing him out there. I mean, he's late at night tonight, right? Isn't he like 10 o'clock or something like that?
Yeah, I think initially it's something along even late in the 10 o'clock hour Eastern time tonight. So, yeah, very, very late.
Right. So, I mean, we'll see how he's doing late at night here. He kind of said he wasn't going to do late night stuff, but obviously you kind of have to do that when you're closing out the DNC convention, right? So, I want to ask. Go ahead, David. Yeah, respond to what you're going to see tonight.
I'm surprised it's not between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m., but that's a separate issue. Look, if you want to look up intellectual analysis in the dictionary, John Stolnis' picture comes up. I mean, that was spot on, John. I mean, you're absolutely right. I think this is going to be not only awkward, but what's going to be, it's not good for Biden if you thought you were day 4 and now you're day 1. That's a bad week. That's a bad month. That's a bad year for Biden. Look, I think there are a couple things to think about tonight. First of all, I don't think Kamala Harris wants to hear these words tonight. Kamala and I, look, she's trying to distance herself and yet embrace him at the same time. This is the tap dance. This is why the other day, if you notice, Trump's folks piled on when Kamala Harris said, grocery prices are too high. This is bad. This is bad. This is bad. And then the Trump folks cut an ad and said, we agree. We endorse this message sponsored by, the Trump campaign. I mean, so what do? You're trying to basically kind of have it both ways. And I think it's going to be kind of awkward for sure. The other part of it is I'm not quite sure if he's going to do the hope and joy tonight. I think he's going to be the threat to democracy guy tonight. I think he's going to be that guy. He's always been that guy. And it gives Kamala Harris a chance to be the optimist here and let her be full optimism and let Biden do her dirty work, which is kind of interesting. Normally it's the VP, right? When the VP does the dirty work for the president, here it's the president, weird, doing the dirty work for the VP who's going to possibly be the president. But anyhow, I think that's what's going to happen tonight. Finally, let me just say this. You notice that it's not hope and change. They're not saying the buzzword. I was watching Morning Joe this morning. I was watching a lot of more of the liberal TV shows. They're all saying hope and joy, hope and joy. It's not hope and change because you can't say hope and change. Because if you say hope and change, well, change from what? Why would Kamala Harris say change? Because she was part of what's currently happening. So you don't want to change necessarily from that, even though you do. So you can't say the word change, whereas Obama could. So that's why I think they're going with hope and joy. And I think that's going to be the theme, clearly.
And I'll say one other thing on this. They do have an official theme for each night of the convention. And the theme for Monday night is it's for the people. And it harkens back to when Harris first ran for president back in her 2019 launch, where she said it was Kamala Harris for the people, that she's always been trying to, as a prosecutor and as a senator, she's working for the people. So that's what you're going to hear a lot of tonight as well from some of the other speakers.
All right, let's look at some of the counter programming here for Trump and his team. They are campaigning this week. And it's interesting, guys, because some of the I've seen the communism word being thrown around a lot. And this was in response to Kamala Harris, unveiling a price gouging policy, which a lot of people were pointing out, saying, well, nobody's doing that. It's just inflation's high, and then they're having to raise prices because everything costs more to get it. And so they kind of said this is essentially price fixing, to just say, you know what? Yeah, the economy's bad. We're just going to make them have lower prices. So that's sort of how the back and forth has been going on that. But my question to you, Dave, you can respond to that, guys, that whole campaign, her one policy that she's put out. But I wanted to talk more broadly about policy because, the J.D. Vance sort of criticism was this is a basement campaign. They haven't put out any policies. They haven't done anything of that nature yet. And the press was kind of going along with it, but the New York Times had a report today asking, hey, this is all great, these messages, but where are the policies at? So is sort of the free ride coming to an end here? Can we expect the press to sort of start asking some more probing questions about, well, what are you going to do?
I think so. And I think she's been taken to task for the price control policy by CNN and many others. Washington Post was just scathing on that. But look, if you already have the reputation or getting the reputation, if you will, of a socialist, last thing you want to do is introduce price controls. I mean, hello, 101. I mean, it's a Stalin 101, folks. Look, you don't do it. And speaking of Stalin, I mean, he tried this in 1929. Being a student of history, all of us being a student of history, we know what happened with the peasant farms. I mean, you had individual peasant farmers, Bach, listen to me now, I'm talking Russian, or at least I think I'm talking Russian, back in Stalinist Russia, who had to give up the farm for, in essence, the good of society, collectivism, Stalinism, and of course, the economy was run into the ground. And so it was just an absolute disaster. Richard Nixon tried this in the early 70s. I mean, he had an executive order in 1971 on price controls. And guess what, guys? It actually helped him at the time. Remember, he was running for re-election in 1972. He introduced this, I should say it was an executive order that he actually did. In 1971, 70% of the American population at the time was okay with this because inflation was about 1% higher than it is today. It actually helped him in 1972 win re-election. And then, of course, ask Jimmy Carter and other people who lived through the 70s how inflation did after that. So it was an absolute disaster to throw out free market principles. The point simply is that this may help Kamala in the short term, but I think ultimately in the long term, and when I mean the long term, I'm talking about up until November. The long term is November now. I think it just solidifies, it gives Trump an easy layup to point out Kamala, the communist, if you will. I mean, that's the narrative they want to sink in. And we know, guys, that in politics, the narrative is everything. Once the narrative forms on you, you're either golden, check out Obama, right? It was a positive narrative for him, or you are sunk. Ask Little Marco and Lion Ted how that worked out. It's all about the narrative.
Yeah, and John, you can react to that too. This first kind of economic thing that Harris campaign put out, but also about what Trump and Vance are doing. They're campaigning this week. What's kind of the right tactic that they should be taking this week to sort of capitalize and try to grab some headlines as it's kind of the DNC sort of big week?
Well, I think you saw both candidates over the weekend in the Trump campaign with President Trump and Senator Vance. They're in Pennsylvania, and we talked about it, I think, last week, how important Pennsylvania was, and why aren't you there? They should be in Pennsylvania, pretty much, making a stop every week. One of them stopping somewhere in Pennsylvania. Grab a cheesesteak, or while you're there, or whatever. Just take advantage of the situation, catch a Phil's game, whatever it is. But seriously, get to Pennsylvania. So they're going to be there. They're going to be in Michigan. They're going to be hitting in these states, again, where Kamala Harris has to win at least two of the three, if not all three, to win the nomination. They've got to spend their time this week while the DNC is in Chicago, and you've got the campaign there. And Governor Walz is, I think, going to be doing a couple of other different stops this week as well. So he's still campaigning until it's time for his speech on Wednesday. But I think the Trump campaign is doing the right thing. They've got to get out. They've got to start camping out in some of these battleground states, and it's a good opportunity to plan events during the daytime, so you can get the cable news networks to run what you're doing during the daytime. Because if you try to do stuff in the evening, you're going to get drowned out. So I think the Trump campaign is being logical about what to do this week. I think going dark and being quiet and not doing anything would be the wrong move, and it's clear they're not going to do that. With regard to the price controls thing, we had said even last week on this podcast, like, Trump really hasn't found a line of attack on Kamala Harris that has worked just yet. He may be finding it now with the communist Kamala, or Kamala communist, or whatever it might be. I'm not wild about him posting AI fake images of Kamala Harris speaking with Russian sickles in the background and all of that. But if you are going to be labeled as a communist, which is, it is what it is. But then you're talking about price controls. That is not a smart political thing to necessarily be trotting out there, especially when there's no detail, right? There's no detail of how does this work. Senator Warren had a plan very much like this, and that was short on details. The devil is in the details with these sorts of things, and that's not the only thing that she's proposing. She's proposing to use federal resources to promote new construction. We know that's a big problem right now with housing and being able to buy homes. She's talking about providing $25,000 in down payment money to first-time home buyers. The argument has been that's just going to increase prices by $25,000. Like, that's not actually going to help.
And more communism, essentially, right?
Yeah.
Here's more money.
Here's more money. So, I mean, I guess, there's neither side has, both sides have that independent researchers have looked at the economic proposals, none of them really seem to be effective, at least on the surface, of bringing down inflation, bringing down prices. They may help in other certain areas. They may hurt in other certain areas, but there's still a lot of detail that needs to be ironed out with some of these economic proposals. Right now, we're just hearing headlines and feel-good statements.
Mm-hmm. All right, David, what do you expect to see from Trump and Vance here in this Democratic convention week?
Yeah, no, ditto. I would, like I said, I'd get an Airbnb in Pennsylvania and just hang out. Absolutely. 100%. Though maybe there'd be a price control for that. Who knows? But yeah, no, I think that's right. Look, I'm just looking at the 270 map as we're going through it. And once again, I don't want to geek out and all of that, but I love geeking out.
No, by all means, geek out. Come on, let's geek out.
This is the time to geek out. So let me try to make it very simple. If Kamala Harris and Tim Walz win all 3 Rust Belt states, it's essentially over. It is over for Trump. There's not a path. I mean, the only way there would be a path, he would have to win all the Sun Belt states, but even that only gets him to 268. He would have to flip some sort of blue state, maybe a New Hampshire for 4 to win it. That's probably not going to happen. So if Kamala Harris wins all 3 Rust Belt states, let's call it what it is. It's pretty much game over. Now, having said that, if Kamala Harris wins 2 of the 3, let's give her the 2 big ones. Let's give her Pennsylvania. Let's give her Michigan. Those are 19 and 15 respectively. If she wins 2 of the 3, then she still is not, she doesn't mean she's going to win. She's got to break through somewhere in the Rust Belt. She's got to win in Arizona. She's got to win in North Carolina. She's got to win in Georgia. One of those 3. She's got to win one of them. She can't win the general election with winning 2 of the 3 Rust Belt states. You just can't. And by the way, that's giving her Nevada, which a lot of people think Trump's going to win Nevada, but we're going to give her Nevada. We'll give her Nevada in that scenario. So and once again, Nevada is part of that Sun Belt. So I'm giving her Nevada, but she's still got to win either Arizona, Georgia, or North Carolina. So bottom line is that it's still a more difficult map for Kamala Harris. And let's also be clear on a couple of big ticket items, if you will. The national polls, you got to take those with a grain of salt at this point for a lot of different reasons. But number one, typically Trump doesn't poll as well. That's been his history. He actually gets more votes rather than you see in the national polls. But beyond all of that, national polls we know don't matter. It's the swing state polls that matter. But beyond all of that, Kamala Harris is not doing as well in the national polls compared to Joe Biden 4 years ago against Trump. She's down about 4 or 5 points, so to speak, as to where Biden was in national polls. So there's that. But also, I think the more important part of this is that the fundamentals of the race have not changed. I mean, when it comes to the economy, when it comes to inflation, when it comes to immigration, and when it comes to crime, the top 4, if you will, Trump polls better than Kamala Harris. Is she making ground? Yeah. Is she in the lead? No. Is it a potential problem for her, all 4? Absolutely. I think the fundamentals of the race still have not changed. I contend that this cake was kind of baked already, and right now you're getting a little bit different icing on the cake. You're getting a little bit more, I don't know, maybe more flavor in the cake. The cake is not has more yeast for sure, but it's still the same cake, and it's been a cake like that for a while. I track it all the way back to Afghanistan. But the bottom line is that I still think this is Trump's race to lose, but I think it's going to be very, very close. And there's no doubt that Kamala Harris has increased her paths to victory more than Biden had. Biden didn't really have a path to victory. It was narrow at that. But Kamala Harris has a few different paths now, for sure.
All right, guys, I'm afraid to even bring this up. But when you said how narrow it's going to be.
Oh, gosh.
Let John answer this. Let John
Does
this mean if it indeed plays out very, very close?
Oh, I know what you're going to say.
Are we going to have 3 weeks until we know who the winner is? That's something we can all pray for doesn't happen. I miss the days when we had a winner by the end of the night. Like, just count it all up.
I think I'm hoping that 4 years after COVID, with the amount of mail-in and early voting and early balloting and all that kind of stuff, that maybe some of the stuff got ironed out that just caused delays. You know, I mean, believe whatever you think about the the election of 2020. It would be nice to have a result sooner rather than later. But again, if you've got to have a lot of recounts in a lot of these states, those take time, and they're going to go through a legal process. Certainly, I don't think any of us have it in us for this race to extend an extra 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I mean, I don't know. When we were having children, all of our kids came late. Like they were 7, 8, 9 days late. Like I can't do that. We can't. Let's not go down that road again where we're still, entering close to November and we don't know who the president is going to be. I don't have that mental strength.
Let me just. I live in Pennsylvania, one of these states that we keep talking about. That's going to be a big deal. I'm on the Pennsylvania government, their election page. Deadlines for the November. This is insane to me, guys. This is utterly insane. Deadlines for the November 5th, 2024 general election. The application, whatever. You get your mail-in vote. Let's say you're going to do it mail-in. The deadline to send your mail-in ballot, 8 p.m. on November 5th.
Oh my gosh.
All right, I just need to pause for 1 second and ask, who is mailing in a ballot at 7 o'clock on election day? I don't get it. I don't understand why that's the deadline. Okay. That's all I'm going to say on that. That's crazy to me. That's insane. I don't know which other states are doing that, but that's crazy.
All I know is I want to make this official request now. If we're not going to know on election night, I'm asking CBN to pay for my therapy bills because I'm going to need CBN to step to the plate and pay my bills because I tell you what, listen, like I said, I started with over-the-counter stuff and now it's going to prescription meds. At this point, I don't know what to tell you. I have no idea. I can tell you this. I think it's going to be a very close election. And if Trump doesn't win, I'll talk to you boys in December for sure.
Yep. Yeah. All right. Well, let's cross that bridge when we get there, guys. But for now, appreciate you being here on this week's campaign catch up. We'll see you next week. David, Brody, John Stolnis, thanks a lot.
You bet.